It gets a little smaller. Oh, yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I just converted it to a PDF. That's all. So anyway, yeah. Just let me know when to advance to the next page.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Great.
So let's begin. Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shayan Bashir. I'm a clinical trials manager, and I'm a physician by training and education. I manage dermatology clinical trials in Mississauga for last 1.5 years, and previously I worked as a physician in many places around the world, and then after coming to Canada, I worked in different institutions in the clinical research where I gained my experience, and now I'm full-time managing clinical trials. Along with that, I'm pursuing my academic goals while doing masters in health sciences from UFT in translational research program, which focuses on out-of-box thinking to improve patient care. So today we are having this conversation, an interactive session on basically to learn more about medical cannabis research as an emerging field and why this is such a hot topic. Although like 1 hour is very short time on the enormity of this topic, but we'll try to manage it as much as possible. And if there are any questions, I mean, you can interrupt me during the presentation, but I prefer in the end. So any question before we start? Anything? Or shall I shoot?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay, so I can't hear anyone. That I understand that there's no question. Okay, so in the learning goals for this topic, medical marijuana as an emerging research field is, I mean, why do we consider this as an emerging field, and what type of research is being done, especially at this time, and why all of a sudden it is a hot topic around the world. More so in North America, where there's a lot of discussion at government level, private level. What are the limitations of clinical research in this particular area, and how emerging research in this field can influence evidence-based and informed practice. So basically, what about this particular area of research that intrigues us, and what we want to explore, and why is it such a huge news everywhere? Is it the rapid growth in knowledge? Is it the recent leaps in technology that they are able to define and break it down and find out like more and more uses of medical marijuana? Previously, it was just basically weed, and the usage was more raw and at personal level. Now, all of a sudden, it has like so many possibilities. Is it because of advancements in diagnostic capabilities? Is it because now we have more funds thrown into it, and the research is being funded like enormously from private and government institutions? Or is it slow and steady progression of knowledge with clinical applications and high-profile current interests? Justin Trudeau. So we have that. Are we aware of clinical trial phases successfully completed or already underway in this field? And how do we know from this research that this is an emerging field? And can we identify obvious limitations or challenges to this area of research? Or are there any substantial confounding variables, any conflicts of interest, or any resource limitations, whether they're geographic, cultural, expertise related, financial, social? And how will this new data in this emerging field will be incorporated in the current clinical practices? Because right now, I mean, there are so many areas which are still gray and unanswered. That is why, like, it's not widely approved. It is emergingly approved. But so many uses, they are still underway in part of the clinical research. So because of the huge potential and possibilities which have been sensed by the clinical research community, and of course, the influential and resourceful organizations and entities, Probably that is the reason it has created so much hype, and they want to explore all the possibilities in this area. Next. So let's have a little bit of, I would say, chat. When we talk about medical cannabis or word just cannabis, what comes into your mind? Let's think about it, take a break and see what comes to your mind when you hear this word cannabis. Rafi, I know you're thinking about so many other words, but let's stick to cannabis for now.
Okay.
So some typical things, we hear all the time, smoking a joint or getting high, THC, all this. It's everywhere on the internet. Everybody can access that. And while cannabis has been there for millennia, so what is it that all of a sudden we know about cannabis that, it's one of the hottest topics and one of the hottest topics in research and as well as in business world. What does come to your mind when you hear this word cannabis? Anyone? Volunteers?
Pain management, cancer
Can't hear you,
management.
Rafi. You're mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Rafi. I don't know why Cheyenne can't hear you.
I can hear you too. Can you hear Rafi? Can you hear me, Shayan?
Yeah, I can hear both
Yeah,
of
I
them.
can
actually.
hear.
I can't hear anyone actually. Is it me or?
I think it's you.
maybe
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me try and disconnect this. Can you hear me, guys? Okay, so I can't hear any of you.
Can you hear me now, Shayan?
My volume is full.
Cheyenne, I can hear you.
Strange. Okay. I don't know what's wrong. Okay, so let me try and unplug my. Can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yes. Oh yeah. Now I can.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right. Yes. Rafi, did you want to say anything about this or any other?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was saying that cannabis in medicine world is related to what comes into my mind is pain management and palliative care for cancer management, these kind of things.
Okay. What about cannabis in general? This is medical cannabis. So cannabis in general, what comes to your mind?
Friends.
Fun.
Friends.
Friends, party, fun. To bring up another word.
Having the munchies.
Stimulants.
Being high.
And, cognitive impairment.
You can probably get control of cognitive impairment once you have done enough, and you know how to deal with it.
Experienced.
But of course, we always associate with THC, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The high causing part of it. But I know there's a lot of other components of it as well.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go over a little bit. I mean, it's a huge topic, so we'll just try to maybe get a glimpse of it. What we can cover in 1 hour. So medical cannabis, like the history of medical cannabis goes back thousands of years. Leonard, can you pull the next slide, please? The one after this. Thank you. So, yeah. So, I mean, it has been used. You can get the traces of its use as a medicinal product in ancient cultures thousands of years ago. But I mean, the early Chinese history, which shows and gives the credit to this guy Hua Tuo. He is credited with being the first one to actually use it as for the medical purposes as an anesthetic. And he reduced this plant to powder and mixed it with the wine to basically help with the administration prior to conducting surgeries. So imagine that. I mean, thousands of years ago, this is what happened. And the medical uses then were highlighted in a pharmacopoeia, which describes the root of the plant to remove a blood clot, while the juice from the leaves could be ingested to combat the tapeworm. And the seeds, reduced to powder and mixed with the rice wine, were recommended in various other materia medica against several ailments, ranging from constipation to hair loss. So imagine, like, every part of this plant has been used for the medical purposes. And you can find this in the history of all ancient cultures in their, medical encyclopedias. This is one of the 50 fundamental herbs in traditional Chinese medicine, and also in ancient Egyptian cultures, where they used for relieving pain of hemorrhoids, and ancient India, where they used cannabis as for psychoactive properties, and the doctor used it for treating a variety of illnesses, like insomnia, headaches, GI disorders, and pain during childbirth. Ancient Greeks, they use it to treat to dress wounds and sores on their horses, and humans, the dried leaves of the cannabis to treat nosebleeds and expel tapeworms. In the medieval Islamic world, the Arabic physicians, they made a diuretic using cannabis, the properties of cannabis sativa, and use it extensively as medication from the 8th to 18th century. So it's also worth mentioning that the fibrous portion of this plant, called hemp, H-E-M-P, has been used as fiber dating back to 10,000 years. Wow, that is fascinating. Similar history 10,000 years ago were used as fiber. So imagine, like, this is not something new. Maybe the discovery, or again, probably the history is repeating itself, maybe in a more refined way, that now we have the technology, maybe more knowledge, maybe more tools to explore and research more and more uses of this plant. Leonard, can you go to the next, please? So every part of this plant has been used. Flowers in 120 different forms of diseases, menstrual disorders, wounds, wound care, some of the nervous disorders, especially marked by local anesthesia. The seeds, which are considered to be tonic and demulcent, they have been used as a diuretic, antihelminthic, laxative. So you name it. I mean, the list goes on. That is why, all of a sudden, the scientists, they are very interested in exploring more and more that how it can help in the modern medicine as well, and can be easily incorporated considering the local laws, ethics, and all those things. So the official history of medical cannabis, which especially in the recent past is linked with the product was called cannabis indica, which is more like an extract, a fluid extract of the plant, and it was physiologically tested in New York. An Irish physician, William Brooks, he actually is credited with introducing cannabis to the Western medicine. So he went to India, and where he conducted in 1830s, while he was living in India, he discovered cannabis, and he conducted many experiments investigating this drug's medical potential and utility. Then he brought it back to England, and after that, it just went on and on and spread all over the Europe, and then different physicians in different parts of the Europe and North America, they started using it for different medicinal indications. So that is kind of a recent link in the history where it came to the Western medicine. Again, whenever there's a new discovery, initially, especially when in the past there were not a lot of resources and knowledge and ethics to conduct clinical research in a very defined way, so the misuse can happen very easily. So that's probably what happened in the recent past, and then the use of medical cannabis was banned in US after the introduction of Controlled Substances Act in 1970. But again, it started attracting interest in medicines later in 1980s, in particular due to its use by cancer and AIDS patients who reported relief. So patients actually who started using on their own, they reported relief of their pain because, as we all know, cancer pain can be very debilitating, and most of the patients, they are dependent on either morphine infusions or chronic use of opioids, and that has its own side effects apart from the addiction potential. So when patients on their own started using medical marijuana, they reported pain relief. So that was quite intriguing, and that brought a lot of attraction and attention of the medical community and physicians that this might be, next painkiller or next analgesic or many other uses, especially in those resistant conditions. One of them was pain related to cancer. So, Leonard, can you go to the next one? So, although it has been used, the next one. The one after this, please. Yes, so legal status. This shows like a map of like where it has been legally authorized to be prescribed by a physician. And the blue areas in the world, they show it's still no prescription is required, and it can be used for any purposes. So green areas, a physician has to prescribe it for you to use, and the blue areas, you can use it at your will. So now we are seeing a lot of reversal of these restrictions in many parts of the world, mostly due to growing claims of the positive health benefits. So previously, in the recent past, after its misuse when it was banned, now because now the Western medicine and the Western world is trying to reintroduce into the modern medicine using the safer ways, of course, through exploring through clinical research and finding more validation for its use in the modern medicine. So now it's coming back, and the medical community and the clinical research world, they're fighting back and trying to prove its usefulness so that it can safely come back and probably provide more and more options to, who knows, so many untreatable conditions. Next, please. So we'll just quickly go over the legal status of the research. How clinical research is the one before this. Leonard, thank you. So basically, at this point, I'm going to ask you this question. How do you think that the legal status of cannabis has affected the clinical research? Like legal restrictions on cannabis, they have significant impact on the clinical research, right? The government is not allowing to bring in medical cannabis or use it in humans, so how can you conduct a clinical research? So far, there have been a lot of restrictions. So how do you think it has affected the clinical research? Whether should it have been open a long ago or whether it's a safe time right now. How do you think it has affected it?
I think it should have been open long ago. And of course, in the United States, federally, it's still illegal. It's by state mandate. So, with the Constitution and that, it's a really gray area as far as like the legality there. But at one time, like cocaine was used medicinally and and heroin. Even now, like we're exploring other drugs that were banned at one time, like oh my god, the one that causes birth defects. What was it called? Thalidomide. And it's being re-explored for cancer research.
Yes.
So I think it's just like any other substance. It should be explored. So that's my opinion.
I think that it should not have been open to all, because still studies are going on, or still research has to be done for the medical cannabis, and there are a lot of illegal aspects are going around. Like when I see outside, there are many drugs have been opened for the medical cannabis. Not even medical, like it's just the cannabis shops when I see go around, and there are many shops are open now, and many people are taking it illegally. So I think it should not be open until and unless the research have been done completely.
Okay.
And I would beg to differ, because all sort of drugs have always been available in market, legally or illegally. So if they are making it legal, at least you can go and get it legally, and you do not have to go through some drug dealer or someone, which is another dangerous thing that could happen. I mean, talking about the terms of using cannabis and outside the field of medicine. And inside the field of medicine, I think, like Leonard said, that it should have been earlier, but I think everything has a right time. I think this is the right time that we are exploring about it, and will be more responsible in using it as we have developed more ethically in clinical research. You will not be doing the unethical trials as conducted previously in a few decades ago. So probably this is the right time. I mean, here in Canada and US, probably we see that it is doable. But if you go to a third world country and you try to make it legal, there could be a lot of problems in the society over there, I think. I think because of the level of understanding, knowledge, things like that.
Very good. Yeah. So, yes, thank you very much. So, as Leonard said, yes, in US still it's a Schedule 1 drug that means that it cannot be used for any medical purposes. So federally, yes, it is like that, but states, because they're independent and they can make their own decision laws. So in certain states it has been allowed, and of course in Canada we see that increasing medicinal use, and more restrictions are being lifted and doors are being opened to conduct more and more research. So if you go to the next slide, Leonard, you can see like a spike in over the years, starting from 1970 when it was originally banned after the Substance Control Act, and now you see close to 2019, and in last decade or a decade and a half, there's a huge spike up in publications, and more research is being done to actually publish the data in the support of medical cannabis, and not only support, to explore all aspects, as everybody was saying, that there needs to be more research done to explore all aspects, whether it's toxicity or addiction potential or long-term side effects. So that can only happen if, the doors are open, the restrictions are lifted, and it's not as strict legally. The government also supports it, because a lot of funding comes from the government, right? So that has big impact the legal part of it on restricting the clinical research on medical cannabis. So if the government is on your side, then a lot more can be done, right? Next slide, please. So, this is again the reflection of what we were just talking about. So this is kind of a pyramid of like how clinical research and takes in effect and brings the newer interventions, whether it's whether it's drugs or devices or procedures. So starting from the animal studies, case reports, case control studies, cohorts, and randomized controlled trials, which is like the top of the pyramid, which leads to the final conclusive evidence before any new intervention can be approved and incorporated in the clinical guidelines. So there are like so much steps involved, and all these steps are so well controlled and legally bound that if there's any restrictions, let's say from the government side or the legal side, then this pyramid cannot grow or complete. There will be a lot of barriers and hurdles. So taking an example of this particular thing, so evidence pyramid will not be finalized unless the legal restrictions are lifted. In case of medical cannabis, let's say we have the evidence going back to 10,000 years. We have the evidence of its use as a medicinal product, but in the modern medicine, we are still holding back. Although we have a lot more knowledge than 10,000 years ago, we have a lot more resources, a lot more modalities and tools and whatnot. The science is so advanced, but still, if this framework is not effectively implemented, the clinical research will never progress. So this is one of the examples of how, given the legal impacts of cannabis on clinical research. So I'm going to reflect back on you guys asking a question. So again, we just went over the legal aspect. So where do you think in this evidence pyramid you expect most of the current evidence for the medical use of cannabis can be generated? Which part of the evidence pyramid will give you the most evidence if you want to support its approval or incorporation in the clinical guidelines? Case control,
free trials,
animal,
randomized controlled trials.
Yeah, I was just going to say that randomized controlled trials.
Yeah, I will also go with randomized controlled trials.
Okay. But do you think
about preclinical or clinically?
Yeah, so do you think, in this case, we can do randomized clinical trials, randomized controlled clinical trials for medical cannabis at this point, considering the legal impact?
In Canada, we can.
Okay. Are we doing it?
I'm not sure if we are doing it or not, but if it's legal in Canada, probably if we go through the proper ethical concerns and we can somehow show it to Health Canada that our study is eligible and it does not risk our patients, we can.
So my question was, where do you get the biggest evidence in this pyramid if you want to support, let's say, medical cannabis uses? Where do you get out of these different steps? What steps give you the most evidence?
Probably case control studies, because they can look back and tell their suggestions that what happened, and on basis of that we can look back and see if it was effective, and on the basis of that we can design cohort studies and then moving forward.
What about preclinical? Sorry?
I would go more for cohort studies.
Cohort studies, okay.
Yeah, because
preclinical, like you said, that the patients who had cancer used it, and then they reported that they had some relief of pain. That is some preclinical evidence that we can have.
Okay, so the preclinical is basically, I mean, in the lab, right? In vitro studies, not human.
Okay.
So when it's used on humans, then it's clinical.
So, I mean, if you'll use it on animals, if it is for psychological or psychoactive studies, I don't know, we'll probably need primates, and we cannot do any studies on primates. And if it's about pain, probably we can use some animal models, but I have no idea if we have used them.
Okay, so if you look at the diagram at the bottom, I mean, there is no human involved, so we don't have a direct evidence that it's effective in the humans. We can just, I
Right.
mean, use those preclinical studies as a data. Okay, that's the most preliminary data which you use to support any future conduct of the clinical trials. Then if you go on the case reports, there is no design. It's just case reports that this is happening randomly, right? Above that, then you get some design and a systematic clinical research can be done, which is like case control studies or cohort studies, and then RCTs, which will give you the ultimate evidence, which I mean, which is more systematic, more acceptable, and which can lead to basically further meta-analysis, systematic reviews, and which can support your argument that it has given you enough research data that you can get the approval, or at least get through the legal framework, right? The pushback. So probably this is what's happening, and along with that, of course, there needs to be a lot of lobbying with the legal authorities. Just not only the clinical research. It's like kind of a two-pronged approach which we need. So can we go to the next slide? So far, again, very few randomized controlled trials have been done, but also many reviews of what evidence currently exists. So far, this is one of the impact or the reason that randomized controlled trials could not be done, because ultimately, if you need any medicinal product to come into the market, you need randomized controlled trials or final case control studies to get the final evidence before you can apply for the license process. But the restrictions were so strict that we could not move forward. And this is the reason that this graph shows that randomized controlled trials were very, very few. And next one. In the preclinical studies, I mean, this is by Paulson Fuji, that goal to accurately model in humans or in vitro the designed biological effects of a drug in order to predict treatment outcome in patients, efficacy, and to identify and characterize all the toxicities associated with a drug in order to predict adverse events in people. So basically, the goal of preclinical studies, which it says here, that is to get the biological effects initial which you need, that whether this medicinal product is eventually capable or safe to use in further studies or humans. So you need to establish two ground rules here, whether it's effective or it's safe. So only then you will be able to move forward in the ladder or in the evidence pyramid to actually establish the final evidence. So this is one of the very important aspect of research pyramid or evidence pyramid, that you need a lot of preclinical data to make a foundation for your randomized controlled trials, or where you need the final, where you actually generate the final data involving the humans. So I'm going to throw another question here. What do you know about the advantages and disadvantages of the preclinical studies, class? Briefly, like 1 point, 2 points, if anybody knows.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So preclinical studies, can you think of any benefits or any disadvantages?
Well, clearly one disadvantage is that I'm assuming we're still back at the animal trials, right?
Mhm.
And obviously we don't have the advantage of the opinion or the subjective opinion of the patient, right? So they're animals aren't able to tell us that what they're feeling, right? We may be able to use certain sensors to know if they're feeling pain, if you're using it as an analgesic, but how they're really feeling, right? If their cognitive functions diminished or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of lose on the subjective and objective observations that way. But although still you get an advantage in the sense where, well, one, you're not causing harm to humans, right? In your studies, and two, there are the people that do report that they've done it or used whatever. There was that one doctor, I can't remember his name now, where he went high on cocaine and tried to give his objective opinion, or not opinions, but his subjective observations from it, and he tried to write it down, but it was incoherent though. But at the same time, there are the few people that do come forward, in some of these studies, like surveys and whatnot, that do tell you, but without having to perform the experiment, thus breaking any ethical boundaries, right?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
I hope I'm right there.
Yes.
I would say the disadvantage could be the finances, like the cost involved in doing preclinical studies, because sometimes it's not that cheap, and also the design, how they are going to do it, because handling humans is very different from handling animals in the lab, and it's a different kind of procedure involving the regulatory authorities. My thinking, yeah,
Mhm.
that's the limitations that you have.
And I think to a certain degree, it can provide you with the pharmacological uh, efficacy, effectiveness, and toxicity of the drug. That it will have some data that these were the results, that if it's effective or not, or toxic, and then on the basis of that, you can design a trial on humans.
Yeah, very good point. So basically, uh, you want to establish like two ground rules again, and you want to establish the evidence that any potential medicinal product is safe to use in humans. So you want to rule out the major toxicities, and you want to make a base and provide some evidence that you have that desired biological effect. So toxicity and efficacy, right? These are the two foundational evidence that you need to progress in the pyramid. So this is one of the biggest advantage of preclinical studies, and you actually need it as a foundation to go forward if you want to conduct randomized control trials. So whenever there's a multi-center randomized control trial going on, and if there's unexpected adverse event or there's any safety issue, you always refer back to preclinical studies. That is your main data uh, to begin with, how this compound uh, could have proven to be a toxic compound or how effective it was, right? So preclinical studies are basically a foundation of your future clinical research for the same medicinal product. So these are very critical and very important in the evidence pyramid. They give you almost like the biggest chunk of data to start your clinical trial. And next slide, please. So, sorry, yeah, the one after this. Yeah, so this is case report and case series, advantages and disadvantages. If you see different categories and different preclinical studies on the side, and it's listing advantages and disadvantages. I won't go over all of it because it's we don't have time for this. But for the cancer cell lines, let's say, in what you want to look at in the evidence in the preclinical studies is it's simple and easy to operate, and it can be used for high throughout drug screening. And disadvantages is changes in the genome structure, because potentially all anti-cancer drugs, they are actually paradoxically pro-cancer too. So they can change the genome of the cells, and that can prove to be carcinogenic. So this is one of the disadvantages, but you will find it through preclinical studies. Doing on the animal studies, you can't just test those drugs straight on the humans, right? So you need this baseline data to move forward in the ladder. So, and this is basically a reflection of ovarian cancer drug screening process, which was published, and genomic analysis and the drug screening article, which was published in Clinical and Translational Oncology. So I hope these slides will be shared with the students and they can review. Right, Shelly?
Yes. No
Okay.
worries.
Thank you. So next slide, Leonard. So what are the case reports and case series? The case report is a detailed report of the symptoms, signs, diagnosis, and treatment follow-up of a single patient. So something which was noticed, like you can say, out of the ordinary medical occurrence in observation, without any systematic design. So that is called a case report, which gives you a detail of symptoms, sign, diagnosis, treatment, follow, whatever happened with that particular patient. And that can include reports on the unexpected associations between disease, a disease or symptoms, unexpected event when observing or treating a patient, unique or rare features of a disease, unique therapeutic approaches, or new adverse effect. So you can write a case report on any of those scenarios. While simple in design and near the bottom of the evidence pyramid, case reports have facilitated recognition of new diseases and adverse effects of treatments. So something which was not noticed before, which was very rare or unique. So case reports helped trigger further research into that particular area, whether it was a new disease, new treatment, adverse events. So like link between thalidomide and malformation in the babies was triggered by a case report. So you see how each brick in the evidence pyramid is so important, especially starting from the base, right? Next, please. And again, this is kind of an observational study type, which you're already familiar with. So, I mean, this is again one of the articles, a case report written, which shows interaction between warfarin and cannabis. So THC, which is the main cytoactive compound in the cannabis, which may inhibit the cytochrome P450, which is which uses warfarin as a substrate. So if that inhibits the consuming catalyzing enzyme, that means warfarin will be unconsumed, and its therapeutic effect can be super therapeutic effect that can lead to increased elevated INR and coagulation state, right? Anticoagulation state. So again, this is also one of the examples of a recently published case report. So you see how like while THC is being introduced into medical practice, this case report will trigger another area of research that we need to explore, whether THC actually affects warfarin, basically warfarin metabolism. So further research will give us the more established evidence whether this needs to be placed as a point of caution, whether we need to do more research, and it will lead to final evidence that we need to put it in place in the clinical guidelines, right? So starts with a case report. Again, another example, cannabidiol in anxiety and sleep, a large case series. So this is another example which triggers further research. Next. So this, after this, Leonard. Yes, so effects of legal status on the research. So, I mean, on the left column, you see different phases of the clinical research, starting from preclinical all the way to phase 4. And you see what we want to achieve out of this phase, whether we restrict a dose or define a dose in a particular phase of the trial, and how the patients are being monitored. Is it like how many number of participants are there in different phases? So you have already studied this in your clinical research modules. And if we look at different phases, again, most areas of the cannabis research are in the early phases, making it an emerging field. We don't have any phase 3 or phase 4 in cannabis, like especially not widespread, not phase 4 actually. So still we are relying on preclinical phase 0, and I'm not sure if we have phase 1 going on, but still we are relying on the preclinical stages of the clinical research when it comes to medical cannabis. So this is a big area of clinical research, and this needs to be explored more and invested more in, I mean, resources-wise, human resource as well as financial resources. So it's going to be a huge thing in coming years, both investment-wise, clinical research-wise, because they want more and more data to establish the clinical practice guidelines, how to put it into place. Next. So let's look at different like examples. Not examples. Let's get a little bit of understanding of how cannabis affects its gives us its effects on our body. So on a very basic overview, we'll try to provide some information so that we can better understand how it affects physiologically and therapeutically, and gives us its therapeutic effects when we use it. Next. So endogenously, we have endocannabinoid system, which is based in your brain, immune cells, and nervous tissue. So we have two different types of cannabinoid receptors. The cannabinoid receptor 1, which is based mostly in brain, lungs, CNS, vascular tissue, digestive, reproductive, and immune. And the type 2 receptor is basically in immune cells, spleen, and nervous tissue. So why do we see such a diverse range of its therapeutic effects or physiological effects of cannabinoid? Because if you see the distribution of its receptors, it's like almost all major body system. So have you ever wondered, like, why is it that our body reacts to ingesting or inhaling marijuana? I mean, even if you are a second-hand smoker, you still feel the effect. The answer lies in the fact that body has its own natural system, which is based on cannabinoid receptors. This is not alien to our body. So we already have the system based in our physiology. That's why the body is accepting it very easily. So this system, which was named after the plant, Cannabis sativa, is a communication system in humans and other vertebrates. It's essential to our health and plays a role in many processes that includes neural development, immune function, appetite, metabolism, energy, pain, digestion, reproduction, learning, bone development, regulation of stress and emotions, sleep-wake cycle, cardiovascular function. Look at the list. I mean, this is fascinating. This is amazing. Like all major systems of the body, they have this communication system. They have these receptors. And this is why, I mean, almost all systems of the body, they respond to cannabinoid use. And it is through this system that the cannabinoids of synthetic and plant origin can exert that effect. Understanding how the system works is only not only crucial for our overall health, but also in determining how to capitalize this huge, potentially revolutionizing product, the medical cannabis. Next. Again, a little bit of elaboration of how this immune system is there in place. So now let's jump into a little bit of examples of how can we harness this potentially huge beneficial product. Next. After this, please. Yeah, next. Speaking of evidence-based medicine. So this is kind of a circle or cycle of evidence-based medicine. So first you ask a question and you formulate a clinical scenario, clinical question, and then you try to acquire the best evidence through clinical research, through the data of previously available preclinical and all phases of clinical trials, and then you appraise you critically appraise the evidence which has been generated through the clinical research, whether the sanctity of that evidence, whether the validity of the evidence, whether that evidence was not biased or compounded by different variables. So that's how you critically evaluate that evidence, the clinical evidence, the research evidence, and then you try to apply to generate more evidence through patient care. So now you have the data, now you apply it on the patients, and now you see how this process, overall process, is evaluated. Question, research, application, assess. So this is how evidence-based medicine comes into clinical practice after going through this strict and lengthy cycle. Next. So one of the examples of Qualcheck Lab, University of Lethbridge, they were collaborating with the Pathway Treatment Company, which is interested in generating cannabis therapeutics, right? And they have generated 600 varieties of marijuana, hemp, which is, I think, the leaves, yes, and marijuana with the hemp. So hemp is just the leaves, and marijuana is like the whole plant. So it has higher concentrations of THC, more than 0.3%, more like 15 to 20%. And hemp is, which has the lower concentrations of THC, less than 0.3, and higher concentrations of cannabinoid. So the marijuana plants, which have higher concentrations and typically used for human consumption, like smoking in the raw use, while hemp, which has lower concentration, which has historically been used in commercial and industrial products like rope, textile, and clothing, and shoes, and food and pepper. So more like, raw material for those. Next. So same lab, which has generated like 600 different varieties using the cannabis plant. One of the ways they do it is to extract the oils from the flowers and then test it in the models. So there are models which are cell-based assays and artificial 3D human tissue models for oral, airway, intestinal tissues that are well established and widely accepted for pathophysiology, toxicology, inflammation, and virus infection, and drug development studies. So this lab has been extracting oil from the flowers in different varieties of the plants, and then they use these oils in the preclinical models. So before it can be used in humans, they use these extracted oil in the preclinical studies to generate more evidence. And here they're taking a substance that is relatively unknown and testing in the preclinical models that are well established from other fields of clinical research. So they use those models which are well accepted, validated, and widely accepted in the clinical research community, and use those models to conduct the preclinical studies on those extract oils from the flowers to establish evidence for more human use. Okay, so Rafe has a question. Why so much interest in cannabis? Is it because of perceived history and effect of this plant, which makes it a potential moneymaker? There are hundreds of plants with medicinal use. Why they are not in the limelight? So, very good question. Uh, one of the points, yes. So when you look at the mechanics of the things, money is there everywhere. Okay, so clinical research, pharmaceutical products. If you say, they are done just for the service of the humanity, that's the biggest lie. So no, money is always there, of course, and you need money to actually generate evidence. So basically, this is kind of a collaboration of scientists, investors, and then they work together. Scientists want more research data, more evidence, and they want to establish something which is new, which is more revolutionizing, which is more trend changing in medicine. But where do the funds come from? So there are two main sources: private entities and the government, right? So money is going to be always there, one of the critical factors in any kind of field, medicine, clinical research. So yes, you are right there, moneymaker, yes. So why this particular? So looking back at the evidence what we have, I'm not saying that there are no other plants which have the medicinal potential. Yes, because all medicinal products right now which we are using, they were plant-based ones in the history, right? So previously there was no tablet, no capsules. They were only plants. So basically all the medicinal products which you have, they are plant-based, if many are synthetic, but the evidence came from the history. But now while we look at this particular one, going back to that endocannabinoid system in our body, this is one of the fascinating models which I've seen. So almost every body system has its receptors. So that means its uses can be very extensive. They cannot be restricted to one particular indication. Not anxiety, not insomnia, constipation. Appetite disorders, immune disorders, cardiovascular, neural. So you name it, the indication and the list goes on. So probably in the recent past, this is one of the most one of the products which has seen to be the biggest potential and the longest and long list of indications in medicine. So probably this is one of the reasons that the attention is more and more. And who knows? This is next morphine. This is next cannabinoid replacement. And more safer use, right? So probably this is one of the reasons. Does it answer your question, or?
Yeah, it does. But like you said that it has multiple indications. Don't we already have different available medications for those indications? And if we have those medications available for those indications, why do we need to work on cannabis? One. Number two, if we'll be using cannabis for those indications, that would come with the psychological side effects of cannabis, right?
Yeah.
So we are going to treat a gastric problem, but it will help us with the gastric problem. Then it will give us a psychological feeling of high, and which can lead to impairment and accidents and everything. So if we already have something for gastrointestinal problem and we can use it instead of cannabis, why cannabis? Why do we need to work on it? I'm just asking it for the sake of a discussion or a research point of view, not going against cannabis.
Yeah, I understand. So basically, you have the answer partially in your question. So this product has indication for almost all body systems, right? So one simplest way to describe is like you have one pill which treats almost like all of your major issues, and you have like 10 pills to replace it. So what would you do? You will choose one. right? That's one of the things. And the second thing is whenever you want to bring a new intervention, whether it's medicine or a different modality, you need evidence. You need clinical research. And when you start using it, no medicine is without any side effect, right? So this is the main purpose of doing the clinical research, to refine that data and bring out the final clinical evidence, what indication, how to use it, how long to use it without having major side effects, right? So this is the purpose of doing the clinical research, and this is why we're having this discussion, to open the doors for this area so that we can find out more how to safely use, while we know that it was designed in our body. It is already there, like endorphins, like in innate painkillers, we already have it. Why we need external? Because sometimes the internal system is fail, or to actually boost it up for certain problems. When we have a certain disease, that means the internal system is failing, we need to boost it. So this is the reason we need additional. And while this plant is, you don't, I mean, it grows on its own, it's widely available, so cheap, right? So inexpensive. And then if you can do research and find out more and more potentials, like it has therapeutic effects in its flowers, in its leaves, in its stem, in its root. So, I mean, you name it. So they see it as a huge potential, like one cure for many diseases in that way, and safer. So with more and more clinical research, we will get more data how to safely use it for different indications, so that we don't have major side effects and prevent the misuse.
Okay. Which brings me to another question. I'm so sorry, but you said that this plant grows everywhere and it's cheap. But as soon as you have the use of it, probably then there will be some regulations that that you are not able to grow this plant on your own, and you'll have to buy it from someone so that they can make money out of it.
It's already there.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you can't take all the money home, Rafe. Government wants most of it. So
I know.
I mean,
I want some share of it.
you can't argue with that.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so that's gonna happen, of course. I mean, that's part of it. But again, it opens up so many opportunities for I mean the research community as well, right? So I mean, you can say money is shared in a way that it's distributed. Clinical research community gets its share to conduct the clinical research. This is what they want to do. Government wants to make money. I mean, of course, that's, I mean, we can't stop that. So let's look at the brighter side, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Next one, Leonard. Shelly, if you don't mind, I go a little bit quicker because we are already past time, and I have another meeting.
I just sent you a message. Please go ahead and cover just important slides.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'll post this on the, Len will post this on the portal so you all have access to it.
Yeah. So, Leonard, can you go to 32, slide number 32?
Just let me know when to stop because it's not numbered here on my computer.
Okay. Yeah. So keep going.
Okay.
This one, thank you. All right. So this is another example of cannabis-based medicines and cancer. So primarily used as part of the palliative care. Sesamid, which is Nebulon, it relieves nausea, alleviates pain, and stimulates appetite. So this is being used to treat nausea and vomiting caused by cancer chemotherapy in people who have already taken other medications like ondansetron and domperidone, and I mean it's not affecting. So now it's, I mean, it shows that it's fully established, it's in practice. So this is one of the examples of Rafe. This answers your question. So why while we have other medications, why bring this one? So this is one of the biggest examples. Like cancer patients They have tried all the options to relieve the nausea and vomiting, and the cancer chemotherapy can paralyze you with the nausea and vomiting. So this has shown very good results. When other options fail, you can give this to the cancer patients to relieve nausea, stimulate their appetite because they can't eat anything, and this also part of the reason that their immunity goes down and they die of the side effects of the chemotherapy, not just because of the cancer. Next. So can CBM be used to treat cancer? This is again one of the article which shows that it enhances cytotoxicity of anti-cancer drugs in human head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. So another example that going back to that diagram again, that it has receptor on an immune system too. So immune system is your natural chemotherapy. Basically, you have natural killer cells which kill the cancer cells when they perceive a threat. So what cannabinoid does is it enhances their killing capacity, and it also enhances the chemotherapy effect to kill cancer cells. They have found in head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. So, I mean, this is huge. Cannabis a cause of anxiety. So this is the other side of the clinical research, that you have to monitor the possible side effects and long-term effects of the uses, right? So a critical appraisal of anxiogenic and anxiolytic properties. So people use it to treat their anxiety, while it can also be anxiogenic. So this is one of another article that that shows that anxiety-related disorders are common type, but for sufferers who are already using antidepressants, anxiolytics, and now they are onto cannabis, which is seen as a natural alternative to many mental health issues and ailments like a stress relief. Some people use it for recreational uses, but right now we don't have much evidence whether this actually relieves your anxiety or other disorders, or whether it causes anxiety or other side effects. So we need more and more evidence, right? This is one of the arguments that you need to make to conduct more research in this area. Other fields, look at that. I mean, this is like Rafi, this is your qualifying one exam checklist. So you need to cover these diseases before you go to the exam. So all major resistant and debilitating issues which we face today, they have indications for cannabis. So the area is vast. I mean, it's kind of limitless. It's like whole clinical medicine is covered here. So enormous.
Which slide are we on?
Oh, sorry. Leonard, can you go next one? Next one from this. I'm so sorry. I was just talking. I didn't pay attention. Okay. Yeah, this one. So these are other areas where it has indication, and the research needs to be done further and further, because we have seen that the receptors are everywhere in the body. So, I mean, that means every part of the body, every major system of the body is an area of research for this. Next. So how do we reach there? We combine the evidence with the clinical experience and patient values. So this is kind of a step 4 for the evidence-based medicine, that we have the clinical expertise, we have the clinical scientific data after doing the clinical research. Now we combine with the patient values. As you were saying, in the third world countries, it might conflict with the cultural values as well. So then as a final step in the middle, where all these fields merge, we get the evidence-based medicine, because evidence-based medicine is not something which is universal. It's kind of a dynamic thing, which can be different in different geographic areas of the world, because that's why it's called evidence. So evidence could be different in different parts of the world, right? So that's how comprehensively we need to generate the research data and evidence. Next. And after we do that, we need to assess the outcomes as well. We can't just leave it as blind-ended. So whether we need to look at these questions, was the application of the new information procedure effective? Most of the time, this is part of the phase 3 and then phase 4. But this data is constantly generated throughout the phases of the clinical trial. Should this be continued in a clinical practice? Were there any long-term safety issues? That's why some of the medications, they are lifted off the shelf even after decades they were in the market. How could any of the 5 steps be improved next time to improve our framework and to generate better data? Next, coming back to the evidence-based cycle, each time this cycle is completed, patient care and clinical practice improves. So each step is very, very important, starting from asking the question and then generating the evidence through the clinical research, keeping a very close eye through critical appraisal of the evidence, and then apply that evidence on the patient care and keep reassessing throughout the life cycle of that product or medicine, whether there are any long-term safety issues, whether that therapeutic indication should be changed or modified. So that's why the eyes are never shut. The safety oversight is never closed off for any medicinal product or intervention. This is the last slide, guys. Any questions? Anything which we missed or you want to understand?
Yeah, there's maybe a couple things too for me. Sorry. Have you done experiments or trial studies specifically with any type of disease in your clinic or wherever you are? Is it mostly focused on cancer research, or is it focused on like neurological problems or?
So in this current role, I haven't. I have done clinical research in cancer. It was mostly for chemotherapy, more like I would say internal audit kind of research. My main area of research was I actually did one clinical research on medical cannabis, which was again it was in McMaster. They were trying to study the long-term side effects of chronic marijuana users, and that was not medicinal use. It was chronic marijuana users because they were experiencing cyclical vomiting syndrome. Whoever are chronic heavy users, so they experience cyclical vomiting syndrome. That vomiting does not stop. One of the pathognomonic sign was they had to take hot showers to get some relief. None of the medications was controlling the vomiting. So I did some research there, but in my current role, no, I'm not doing any cancer research or cannabis-based research.
Okay, and yeah, you were talking about where habitual use of it. Now, have you found it to be in any of these studies where it became like that so-called gateway drug?
Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
I'm just saying through the clinical trials that you've observed or whatever. Have you found out that where the use of cannabis-based products has led it to be like a gateway drug, where it leads to like very habitual use, like you mentioned before, or leading to a different drug, let's say to ecstasy or something something else?
So even in the raw form, it does not have that huge potential of misuse to the level of ecstasy or those those street drugs. For the medicinal use, I have personally observed in the clinical practice that it has the potential for that being a gateway drug, because I observed so many patients who were chronic pain patients, and they were like on a list of opioid and non-opioid painkillers, but their pain was they were totally dependent. I mean, you just easily can say that they were on like morphine infusion or opioid infusion. If they're off it, they are in pain, and I saw them suffering. And many of them personally took the initiative, because now it's available, like you can order from Amazon too. So they tried on their own to see if it works, because I mean, people talk and they watch TV and social media. So many of them responded so well that, I mean, their life changed. So it does have a lot of potential, and not without having any major side effects, because the one which is available for the medicinal use is already refined. It does not have that potential for huge side effects. But still, I mean, we need to do a lot more research to find that. We're just looking at like the tip of the iceberg right now.
And another is through these clinical studies. I know one study that was used is to prevent seizures, right? Epileptic seizures. Now, has it also been found quite useful to, let's say, abate the symptoms of, let's say, chorea in Huntington's disease, or let's say the tremors in Parkinson's disease, or anything like that? Have you noticed that, or been informed of that?
So I haven't noticed like in my personal experience or observation, but yes, because of its potential, I mean, I don't have any reason to believe that it's already in established practice or recommended guidelines, but evidence is still there, and I think a lot of research is being done to generate that final conclusive evidence that it does affect and it does give you a relief of symptoms in chorea and possibly Parkinson's symptoms, because as we saw in that diagram, it does have CNS receptors. So, I mean, the potential in basically relieving neuronal problems is huge. So I don't think there's like conclusive evidence at this point, but the potential is huge and the research is being done.
Okay, and one last one, I promise. This is the last one. Have your studies also included like synthetic variants of cannabis, like salvia, or I don't know what the street names of them are, but
I haven't been part of the studies as such using the synthetic cannabis compounds. It's just in my observation. So one study which I was, part of that was again based on very specific indication to monitor the side effect and generate some evidence why and how it does it, the cyclical vomiting syndrome. But other than that, I haven't been part of any studies related to the synthetic compounds. So I can't, say for sure.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. Anyone else? That's my last one. Anyone? Bueller, anyone?
And I really apologize if my laptop is almost dying. I didn't bring my charger. I did not expect it to go that long. So if you have any question, please ask quickly. I have 3%.
Okay. I do not have any question.
I'm
If I'll have, I'll email you.
Sure.
I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shayan.
Thank you.
So much,
You all take
Thank you so
for
much.
taking the time.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.